Hey there, today we are learning about text structures. Last week we learned about text structures, we learned about problem and solution, and we learned about chronological order. This week, the text structures we are focusing on is cause and effect, and comparing and contrasting. When we read our passages, we need to look for those clue words that help signal which text structure we are using. Remember, for cause and effect, there are words such as because, as a result, and cause and effect. For comparing and contrasting, you look for words like, unlike, similarity, comparing, and maybe even contrasting. So, looking at our passage today, there is the two titles, Why Are the Oceans Salty? And Oceans and Seas. We are going to read both passages and determine the author's purpose as to why he used the type of structure, the text structure, and of course the evidence to support it. We're going to first start with our unravel. I'm going to unravel the title, Why Are the Oceans Salty? And Oceans and Seas. I think that both of these are going to be talking about water systems and what is happening in a water system to compile oceans and seas. I'm then going to look through the numbers, and we have 2 paragraphs in the first section, and we have 1 paragraph in the second passage. We are now going to go through and find any important words. I do see 2 titles. There is a closed reading habit box and a small illustration up in the corner of some waves. The closed reading habits box says, when you read the article, underline details and tell what each passage is about, and circle the words or phrases that suggest text structure. We are now going to go to our questions. Our questions are on page 221. On 221 it says 1. Identify the purpose of the text structure of each passage and tell what evidence helps you find the structure. Text structure is an important word there because that's what we're going to be looking for. And also evidence, because that means we need to find exact examples from our story to support the things that we think are correct. Alright, let's begin reading. Please put your finger on the first word. Why are the oceans salty? Paragraph 1. For much of history, it was a mystery why oceans were salty. Different cultures, assuming that the ocean began as fresh water and only later became salty, came up with their own explanations. The Vikings related a story of sailor dropping a magical salt grinder to the bottom of the ocean. People in the Philippines told of a giant who carried stacks of salt from island to island, but then accidentally dropped them into the sea. Other cultures had similar stories to explain the cause of the ocean saltiness. Paragraph 2. The scientists eventually figured out the truth. The stories were correct in one way. The amount of salt in the ocean has increased over time. Where did all the new salt come from? From the land. Most rocks contain salts, and over millions of years, the forces of wind, rain, and ice break down the rock and release the salts. Rainfall carries the salts to rivers, and the rivers carry the salts into ocean. As a result, the ocean is salty. Looking at that passage, I see some really important clue words there. I saw the word as a result, we should highlight. I also saw in paragraph 1, it says, explain the cause of the ocean saltiness. There's the word explanation in the second sentence. And I see the word mysteries of why. Remember, the cause is the why and the effect is the what happened. Going on to our next passage is called Oceans and Seas by Richard Green. Paragraph 1. Some people use the word ocean and sea interchangeably, but these words refer to different things. An ocean is an enormous body of water, such as the Pacific or the Atlantic. In contrast, a sea is a similar body of salt water, such as the Mediterranean Sea between Africa and Europe. Oceans are so large that people view them as surrounding the continents. The opposite is true for seas. They are surrounded by other large geographic features. Some seas are entirely encircled by ocean. The Sargasso Sea in northern Atlantic is an example of this. Other seas, such as the Hudson Bay in Canada, are enclosed on some sides by ocean and some sides by land. Finally, a few seas, such as Caspian in Asia, are completely locked down with continents. Despite their differences, however, all seas have two things in common. They are made of salt, and they are smaller than oceans. So I see in the title there it says oceans and seas, and after reading it, I'm thinking about that those two things are not unanimous or not the same. I see some words that are really important, like different. There's also the word here, in contrast. That means how they are unlike. There's the word opposite in this sentence. And also at the very bottom here, it says they have two things in common. And common means the same as alike. So those are the things they have alike. I'm also seeing this word at the beginning, interchangeably. That word is really important because it has two roots and two suffixes, inter, change, able, and ly. So looking at interchangeably, inter, between or back and forth. Change means to switch from one or the other. Able is to be, and ly is a suffix that changes an adjective to an adverb. So interchangeably, to me, probably means that they switch back and forth and have a meaning that can sway one way or another. Okay, after reading our text, I see that there are the clue words that we have already highlighted. What we should go over now is talk about how these words are contributing to the text structure. With your group for about 2 minutes, please decide which passage is cause and effect and which passage is compare and contrast. You have 2 minutes. Begin. All right, let's come back together. So looking at our graphic organizer on page 221, it has our two titles, Why Are the Oceans Salty? And Oceans and Seas. In our text structure box, we'd like to talk about what the text structures are for each. I see in the passage why the oceans are salty. Why are the oceans salty? There are clue words that indicate that text structure is going to be cause and effect. I'm going to write on this page C and E for cause and effect. On your paper, please write the full word out on your paper. Cause and effect. Write the entire phrase on your box. Let's talk about the author's purpose. So, the reason the author wrote this story for us to read is to inform why the oceans are salty. So it told us why the oceans are salty. And it's to inform, since it's a nonfiction text. Evidence of that text structure, we have at least 4 pieces of evidence you need to go back and add from our story. Next, we have the text structure of oceans and seas. This is going to be a compare and contrast article because there's words such as different, in contrast, opposite, and in common. That is going to tell us its cause and effect. Compare and contrast. Like I said, oceans and seas will be compare and contrast. The author's purpose for this passage is to describe things that are the same and things that are different between oceans and seas. So it is comparing and contrasting the things that are similar and the things that are different about oceans and seas. As for evidence, we have at least 4 pieces of evidence from our text I'd like you to look back and add to your graphic organizer. When you are done, please raise your hand and show that you have completed your graphic organizer. Then you may share your charts. Look at the evidence you found for each text structure. How does each text structure support the author's purpose? And what evidence do you have that that text structure supports the author's purpose? Wrapping up, when you are done sharing with your group and completing your graphic organizers, please remember that question number 3 is your homework. Question number 3 states, explain how the text structure of each passage supports the author's purpose for writing that structure and that passage. Use evidence to support your response and write it in the space provided on page 226. Thank you for looking at these text structures of comparing, contrasting, and cause and effect, and finding evidence in your text to support your findings.